Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 279 or 279. My name is John O'Logan, and I am still in Nova Scotia. So again, it was a month here. I'm in my last week. We're recording this on Thursday. I fly back on Wednesday. It's been a good trip. It was really nice seeing my parents. It was really nice spending some time out at their cottage. But to be completely honest, I'm ready to go home. There's something about going home that just makes you feel good. And I miss Toronto. And so the second I'm there, I am going to climb into my bed with my pillow and have a lovely, lovely rest. But for now, I'm still in Nova Scotia, so I still will sound a little bit strange because I'm using my travel mic. And while I'm in Nova Scotia, I am not alone because I guess they're not here with me, but they're with me in digital form.
I am in the country, so that's something.
That is something. Okay, so first up we have Aleks.
Hello.
And we have Noah with us today.
Hello.
All right, so folks, we are going to be talking about some pretty big games that have come out the last few weeks. One of which is, how do I put this? The DLC to one of the more controversial games that has kind of come out in the last few years. So Cyberpunk 2077 came out in December of 2020, I believe, and for years and years it was delayed. We were promised the moon. CD Projekt Red really went in on the publicity and building up expectations for this game, and arguably they didn't work. The game was a buggy mess. It was on Bethesda levels of, oh my god, I can't believe that they released this in this state. Over the last few years, however, through various patches and things, CD Projekt Red has seemed bound and determined to, I guess, fix their flawed product. And now, I haven't played it, but it seems that it was in a pretty good playable state. And with that, they released the DLC, which is Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, which instinctively I just call, I keep thinking of as the Phantom Hourglass, which is really funny to me, because this isn't on the 3DS and doesn't use a stylus.
Not with that attitude.
Yes, well, God knows if you can't run 2077 on a PC, chances are you're probably not going to be able to run it on last gen portable Nintendo hardware. Although you never know, somebody might do a demake. So the cool thing about Phantom Liberty is, yes, it is a substantial chunk of DLC, probably about 20 hours or so worth of content, and it adds an entirely new, neighborhood or district to Night City. It also actually revamps a lot of the game's mechanics. They're considering it Cyberpunk 2.0, and some of the things like car combat, the way that the police are handled in the core game has been completely revamped. And apparently it's kind of gotten to the point where this should be the game that we got at the end of 2020 and then didn't. So let's talk for a little bit. Aleks, you recently played Phantom Liberty, and you mentioned in your review that it kind of served as a redemption for CD Projekt Red. Do you kind of agree with my assessment of everything that happened there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I kind of start the review saying, like, I never played the game on release. I really wanted to, but I was one of the people kind of hoping that I'd be able to play it on a last-gen console on my PS4. And above all else, like, that was just the part that they really just completely dropped the ball. I don't even, like, I'm really confused why they even wanted to pretend like it would still be able to be played on those consoles. They didn't really give any warnings that, like, it wouldn't be playable. They still released it. They still expected purchases. Famously, it was the first game, I think, to ever be delisted from the PlayStation Store because of how poorly it ran. So that was a real bummer, because I was a huge fan of The Witcher 3, as so many other people were. And the promise of this game was great. A lot of, obviously, it generated tons of hype. Had some trailers that turned out to be, like, just completely staged and just basically, like, created out of the game itself. Outside of it, I mean. So that was all pretty rough. So I just stayed away from it. But I finally got a newer console last year, and I ended up getting it for Christmas for my brother last Christmas. So I first played it beginning of this year. So that was after the 1.5 patch, which was kind of, I guess, the beginning of the sort of redemption arc that they started putting the game on. And honestly, like at that point, like technically, it was playing really well. The game looked fantastic. I had very few glitches or like just like visual like T poses and nothing like that was happening of the sorts that you'd see posted online when the game first came out. But at the same time, I didn't love the game. I thought the world, as beautifully crafted as it was, didn't feel substantial. There wasn't much to do. I never felt incentivized to kind of get out of my vehicle and start like exploring things, hoping that I'd find something interesting and unique and emergent from that world. So I just sort of, the open world was just this kind of empty space. I was going from spot to spot, doing quests, which some of them were fantastic. Like pretty much all the main quests were like real highlights that were quite memorable and pretty much on par with what they've done with Phantom Liberty. But it was all surrounded by a bunch of kind of hit or miss side quests, and above all else, just combat and character building that just wasn't fun to engage with, in my experience at least.
Well, in the review, you refer to this as an identity crisis, where at its core, I guess when it's at its best RPG self, it is incredible. It has, amazing set pieces, some amazing environments, and some really, really great quests. But at the same time, there's a lot of generic AAA open world, crap that comes with it. So it seems to be wanting to be two things at the same time. And while it succeeds in both, it kind of makes each one a lesser, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, and that's exactly how I feel about it. The game's strongest points, you're kind of like fully immersed in these very cinematic like situations, and the quests will like take you from things like talking to like an NPC about like setting up what you're gonna do with the mission, talking like with a group of people. They all have like interesting potential motivations, and you're kind of making little dialogue choices that feel meaningful, and that kind of ends up escalating to these bigger, more dramatic and bombastic set pieces that are just like really involving and genuinely like impressive. Like the way this game kind of like just feels like that kind of holodeck ideal of like being like really like first person immersed in the moment at its best is just a thing of beauty, a real achievement. But then you end up encountering some like clunky design stuff, some unsatisfying combat, and that satisfaction ends up just dropping off as a result.
I understand. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I really do enjoy the AAA open world stuff. Like I enjoy games like that sometimes. And I think based on your review and based on what I've been hearing about Phantom Liberty, this title does address some of your critiques there about it. It feels like, for example, you describe Phantom Liberty at its core as a spy thriller. So tell me a little bit about the narrative focus of this game.
Yeah, so this is really where they just had it figured out. It's clear that they realized that the main missions, like that really like carefully crafted dramatic work, was the highlight of the game, and what made it really special. So Phantom Liberty doubles down on that. Takes place in a much just like a new small sector of Night City that you don't really have to leave at many points of the expansion at all. So it's like a really condensed environment, and you can basically just go from like main quest to main quest, just experiencing these peak highs. And what that quest is about is this sort of more spy espionage type story, where you're engaging with these FIA agents of the NUSA, basically the new United States of America, and their version of the FBI is what's going on here. And these characters are great. Like another thing that CD Projekt Red has excelled at with the Witcher series before this has been like their characters and how believable they feel, how interesting and nuanced the interactions you have with them are.
And, they usually get some good actors too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the actors they got this time around, Idris Elba kills it. Really good work from him, and the Songbird and Aleks and the different supporting casts are also just great. And where this kind of like excellence at character development meshes with this kind of spy vibe really well is that like as you're getting to know these characters and they're kind of drawing you into their world and their kind of what they have to do, you're kind of like seeing like some tension between them, and they all have like a history with each other, and they're all kind of like keeping things from you, and not necessarily like a super like not in a way that feels like they're deliberately trying to manipulate you, but in a way that they that makes them just like seem a little bit suspicious, and that even though you're getting to know them and they're likable, that you don't really know exactly what's going on throughout.
Everybody has their secrets.
Story. Exactly.
Yeah, and because of that, I imagine that there are quite a few more shades of gray in this particular DLC. That really, I mean, there's not a lot. I've gathered this from your review and from some other sources that there are. Cynical's not the right word, but it's a dark. I guess there's just not a ton of hope here.
Yeah, definitely not a ton of hope. All the character situations, they've all been kind of like screwed in the past. Some of them have even screwed each other.
Figuratively and literally, I imagine.
I'm not sure about the literally, but definitely the figuratively.
What? That's ridiculous. CD Projekt Red, we want Idris Elba in a tub. That's what we want.
Yeah, I guess that's the one thing. If anything, if like you loved the thirst factor that was in The Witcher 3, and a lot of like the Cyberpunk base game as well, that there's not much of that here. They're focused on just like the shadiness and the darkness and the mystery behind these characters and their motivations and this plot.
Yes, I hear there are fewer sex toys in this newest version of the game.
Yeah, for the best, I'd say. That was another one of my complaints with the base game. Was just this tonal awkwardness that would come off with like some of the side quests, some of the writing, when like this kind of more anti-corporate, deliberately like political themes of like cyberpunk that they're clearly like drawing from like literature and all that. Just kind of like meshed really awkwardly with like GTA style like toilet humor, and thankfully I think they really ditched that tone of the base game a lot and just went for like just hard spy thriller storytelling, which works to the game's benefit for sure.
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the new setting. So it's set in Dogtown, which is a new area, a new district of Night City. What makes this area a little bit different from the other districts of Night City?
So one thing is just that it feels, as a player, at least I felt a lot more incentivized to actually just get out of my vehicle and actually see what's going on and drink in the atmosphere and spend some time just seeing what this place is about. Like I said, like because Night City itself was so big and so insubstantial with like encounters and events that like I just never felt inclined to explore it. But here I was constantly just exploring, seeing what's going on. There's just like a lot of conversations happening. There's just like it's like in a really kind of like devastated state, Dogtown, because it's kind of like a separated branch. It's like led by this guy Kurt Hansen, who kind of used to be involved with like the NUSA, but once he like ended up getting power in this district of Night City, just kind of leaned into that and sort of became its leader, its sort of dictator. And his whole thing is that he wants it like Dogtown to be a place where you're like free from the Night City police, where like he and his kind of militaristic squad bar guest sort of have your back. But as you see the state of Dogtown, it's clearly not working to the benefit of like every person living there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the name of the place is Dogtown. It doesn't exactly have the high gleaming towers in the sky feel when the district is called Dogtown.
Yeah.
But despite that, it does seem to be a little bit more, I guess, alive, narratively speaking, than the rest of Night City.
Yeah, narratively and mechanically, because there's these two different new sorts of little side gig sort of things you can do that are airdrops, which is basically as you're going around Dogtown, suddenly like you'll hear like a whistling from the sky and something like crash lands sort of near where you're walking. And like a bunch of different kind of like mercenaries and whatnot end up gathering there because they want to raid the goods that dropped. So you can go there if you follow like the smoke signal that kind of emits from the airdrop. You can get into skirmish, and if you get out of there, if you get to the drop first and get out of there alive, then you get a whole bunch of good loot that you can use to upgrade your character. And the other little activity they give you is these car retrieval missions that you'll be walking around and you'll see someone standing by like a nice car, and like you've kind of been contracted to take these cars and like drop them off for this dealer, and you get really nice rewards for that. And that also sort of becomes the gateway for showing you kind of how to engage with the vehicular combat, which is pretty solid. The vehicular combat, it's a nice little touch. I'm glad they included it. It's not something that I wanted to do that much, but I had fun with the little bit I did and got some good rewards out of it.
Good. How does the DLC integrate into the core experience of the game? Is this a post-game DLC, mid-game?
So it's mid-game. So I think you can choose from the menu just to like skip right to Phantom Liberty if like you don't have like a save file that you'd want to load up for it. I think the game puts you up to level 20, gives you a random character, makes some decisions for you of the story up to that point, and then just lets you go right into it.
Yeah, you mentioned it's a very standalone experience, so the fact that they give you that option is, well, useful.
Yeah, exactly. So it does work extremely well as a standalone story, I'll say. I know, like, I think CD Projekt Red themselves and like a lot of different journalists have been saying that like the ideal way is to start the game over and work your way all the way up to Phantom Liberty, and then experience it, and then go back to the base game and get the whole new experience on offer. Personally, I don't think that's necessary. Like, it has been integrated well with the main narrative, from what I can tell, with some interesting implications depending on what ending you get in the expansion itself that carries on through into your playthrough, and even opens potentially a new ending to the main game. But other than that, this is just like a really awesome standalone package. Like the characters from the base game don't really factor in. All the major players are newly introduced. The pacing is just so much tighter than what I experienced in the base game. I was so engaged throughout the whole thing. The fact that you're a higher level when you start just means you get to have more fun with the gameplay right away. So in that sense, I think Phantom Liberty as a standalone expansion, as a standalone like title itself, works exceptionally well. And that if you don't want to start the whole game over, you don't need to.
Okay, but just to be clear, Keanu's still here, right?
Oh yeah. Keanu's still around. Yeah. He's just as kind of endearingly deadpan as ever. And I know like some people didn't like his performance in the base game. I thought it was perfectly fine. It's like, it's Keanu Reeves. I don't know what kind of acting people were expecting, but he made it work really well. And I just like Johnny Silverhand's just a really cool character from like a role-playing perspective, because he's got like his own very strict principles and ideals and ideas, and he'll like appear during like key narrative segments. He'll chime in and sort of act as kind of like a springboard for you to bounce your own ideas of the situation off. So in that sense, Keanu's really great and serves that sort of interesting narrative purpose as well as he ever did in the base game. And also you get some new character building from him as well, because relating to the story, he kind of like ends up identifying with Idris Elba's character in a way, seeing him as like somebody that he could have became, and that's a really interesting point that gets developed.
You mentioned that we said it a few times. This is about 20 hours or so worth of content, which, to be frank, is nothing to sneeze at. Games do not need to be 100 hours, although when you add the DLC into this, you're looking at approximately a 120-hour game. That's a lot of game. So do you think that the DLC was, like, in my mind, a good DLC? This is just my opinion. It's kind of like the main game with all the fat trimmed out. It's a very streamlined experience. So do you think that the game's length, that the DLC's length, was appropriate for the amount of content that you got?
Absolutely, because like I said, like in the base game, the original release, the main quests and like a couple of the side quests focused on like the main sort of NPCs, the main like potential like romance characters. Those were the strengths of the game. And here you get like pretty much half of this package, I think, is just like the main quest. And all the side content that is there is, for one, like integrated kind of with the story. Like at one point, there's like a bit of downtime where you have to like wait to hear back from one of the characters, and then it's just like, oh, so now just do some gigs for the local fixer. So gigs were kind of like these smaller side quests from the base game. But here you kind of like need to like earn his favor to like help you get set up for one of the missions. So you start doing a couple of those side quests, and that ends up being like kind of like a nice little downtime from the kind of more intense main quest, while also just being like really good side quests. Like there isn't nearly as many side quests and gigs as there were in the base game, but all the ones that they did include are pretty good quality wise.
Well, about the base game, like I said off the top, this is the update 2.0, I guess, and you say that one of the best ways that CD Projekt Red has, I guess, altered the base game is by putting some new life into the character building system, so, including revamped skill trees, things like that, to give the gameplay a little bit more flexibility. Can you go into that a little bit?
My God, yes. This was just, like I said, like the base game just became kind of miserable gameplay-wise. And I played the same kind of build that I did in the base game, which was kind of like an intelligence-based build, a netrunner / like basically like a hacking wizard sort of build, because I thought that was pretty unique to the setting. And basically what that amounted to in the base game was that I'd stand kind of like hoping to get as many enemies in my field of vision as possible. I'd go into a menu and I'd just upload hacks / spells that would just destroy the enemies. And that was basically what my build involved. Here, because so originally the way character building worked is they had these really big perk trees with just tons of perks that had very minuscule insubstantial modifiers to like damage you dealt, and if you invested in some of those, you ended up getting maybe like a cool new power related to that aspect of building. But here they really streamlined it. Each kind of skill tree is now just like 3 separate branches almost, and each of these branches kind of have like 3 what I called like core perks. So like these are perks that as soon as you invest in them, they like immediately open a completely new door to your playstyle. So like for example, with an intelligence-based build, one of the branches is kind of focused on allowing you to do these hack combos that if you queue up your hacks in like kind of a methodical way, you actually end up gaining back some of your I forgot what it's called. It's basically like your magic points, what allows you to upload the hack in the first place. And then like another one is focused on buffing like smart weapons, which are weapons that have like auto lock. So I ended up ignoring the smart weapons thing because I was less interested in that, but I buffed my hacks a lot. And then I ended up going into another skill tree for like dexterity. Ended up, because the branches are all separate, I ended up buffing my sword technique, so I was able to like to deflect bullets with swords. And then I went into a tech skill point to get proficiency in like tech weapons, which if I charged them and kind of released a shot at the right time, it would have like this crazy AoE explosive electric effect, which was really fun. So I was able to mix and match from like these different skill trees in order to create a playstyle that was appealed particularly to me, essentially. So that was great and a massive improvement from what was on offer before.
Well, speaking of things that appeal specifically to you, that's actually a point that closes out your review of this game, which is this DLC specifically. It really did hit you where you lived. It really was. How do I put this? Your cup of tea. In the RPGs that have been released this year, which include like Final Fantasy 16, Starfield. Why would you say that? What kind of gamer do you think this would really, really appeal to?
So the reason I think this appealed to me a bit more than Final Fantasy 16 or Starfield is because it had like a very clear kind of like narrative focus. It was like very invested in kind of just this really like immersive storytelling that like really expertly weaved kind of like cinematic storytelling with a lot of like kind of visual nuances and little developments like that, but also like the great part of like interactive storytelling, which is having these like little interactions with characters, not only making like sort of these big decisions that kind of change the course of the narrative, but these kinds of smaller interactions that even though if they don't make an impact, they feel very impactful in the moment because a character is like opening up to you, and how are you going to respond to that, and how does that kind of measure up with what you've been saying to like other characters and things like that. So I just felt really invested in the kind of the story that was trying to be told here. I really appreciated how this game didn't need to be this massive experience with tons of side quests, tons of open world, just kind of empty space to traverse. I just loved the tightness and consistency of this all. I think it's just like Zelda was great, Final Fantasy was great, Starfield was great, but like this, just I want more games like that could be a full game that of what this expansion offered. Kind of just like a tighter experience, really expertly and lovingly crafted, but doesn't overstay its welcome and gives you some really interesting narrative pieces to chew on afterwards. So that's why for me, this was probably my RPG of the year.
Well, it would be very, very nice. I understand that CD Projekt Red has made a little bit of noise that this is going to be the only DLC to come out because they're moving on to the sequel for Cyberpunk 2077, which presumably we'll see in 2031 based on their previous timetable. So it might be a few years, but at some point you might get your wish. Speaking of some of the other games that came out this year, like Starfield, for example, recently, Noah, you absolutely plowed through Starfield for us. You really, really enjoyed it. And then as soon as you finished, I was just like, good, now give us more content. Here's Liza P, because you don't get to sleep, apparently. No sleep for Noah. You went from the stars and you immediately dove into a Souls-like, which is gotta be just a bucket of cold water in the face. So Liza P was announced a few years ago. We got the trailer. I remember seeing it at the time and being like, steampunk Pinocchio, don't care. And since then, of course, it's turned out to be, it had quite a bit, there was quite a bit of buzz about it. It kept building. I kept getting more and more interested. I think the most interesting thing for me about Lies of P is that it is a Souls-like, And unlike, I don't know, all of the best Souls-like, this one's not designed by FromSoft. In fact, has nothing to do with them at all. And you describe Lies of P as a rare gem in the Souls-like genre. So as compared to, well, obviously, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, the FromSoft games, what would you say sets this game apart from those beloved Souls-like titles?
So from the From Software games, I'd say the thing that sets it apart is narrative clarity. Like, I think it has a pretty clear thread that like puts its narrative together.
Thread, don't you mean string?
A string, yeah,
I've got
exactly.
No strings to hold me down.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a marionette string, if you will, that holds its narrative together. I would also say that in some ways, the gameplay is also maybe a bit of an evolution, but also departure from software games with, a semi-reliance on item use and your like gun weapon thing that's on your left arm. It brings a few new things to the table that are in dialogue with what From Software is doing, but majorly set it apart from the gameplay of those games. I mean, it's similar to Bloodborne in its like freneticism and its like reliance on aggression, but you don't get health back when you attack enemies after they damage you, unless you're shielding, and you do have to guard appropriately, sort of like Sekiro. So it's a bit of a mashup, but it's got some new ideas.
Speaking of those new ideas, like you said, I think some of that is the narrative focus of this game. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Because, I mean, it's based on Pinocchio. Everyone knows the story of Pinocchio. If you don't know the actual fairy tale, you at least know the Disney film with, hopefully, the animated version of the live-action remake with the little wooden boy whose nose grows when he tells a lie, and he only needs to be good, and you get swallowed by a whale, and there's lots of things that happen. So this game is a twist on all of that. Tell us what's going on here.
Actually, in the book, Pinocchio gets swallowed by a shark, but I
suppose
a whale is a decent stand-in. Although it does say something that it's a less predatory animal, doesn't it? In choosing a whale, and also a mammal. Anyway, yeah, it is based off of Pinocchio. It's much more based off of Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio. He wrote The Adventures of Pinocchio in the 1800s, and it's sort of a text about like labor and an oppressed lower class, but it's told in the style of a children's book. It was one of many serialized novels that was in I want to say like a newspaper or magazine or something of the time, and it had many monthly issues, and it was very dark, especially at the beginning. The original ending of The Adventures of Pinocchio is Pinocchio getting hanged to death by the cat and the fox characters, which are two other famous characters. Probably the two most famous behind Geppetto and Pinocchio, and maybe the whale, I guess, or the shark. But Lies of P sort of makes an homage to this darkness. I think it brings in a lot of those elements of like trickery with the other human characters in the game. I mean, I guess others not correct, but the human characters in the game, there's an element of trickery. There's an element of these like working class ideas. There's an element of oppression, and yeah, I don't know. I think that it sort of merges the worlds of the sort of semi-dark movie and the book and other media that's come out about it, barring the one that's been memified a little bit these days.
Pauly Shore is not playing the lead in this game.
Yeah, exactly. No, you won't have to hear him say, "Father, I'm ready to be out on my own."
Father.
Yeah.
How much do you want to bet that someone is probably going to take this game and they're going to replace the voice files with Pauly Shore.
Oh, that'd be so funny. Pauly Shore is a good voice actor. I don't know why it was so like off color.
They
I don't know.
must have been paying him peanuts.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the lie mechanic, I guess, because it is lies appease. So historically, I believe in the book it was only when he tells a self-serving lie, but in the Disney film, when he tells a lie, it doesn't matter, good, bad, his nose grows. So how does lying work in this game for both the story and the gameplay?
Yeah, lying is not nearly as morally prescriptive as it is in the movie, for sure. But it might be a little more so than the book there, but it kind of does the opposite thing, right? The book does have this thing where like lying is sort of related to, your ability as a person to get like an education. Your like character has something to do with that in the book, but in the game, you lie in order to like sort of gain entry into places or like get around certain characters' stories. Some storylines that characters have, in order to finish them, you have to like lie in certain areas to them. And it can also be used to like anger certain characters, which also progresses their stories. And it's also used for a certain item in the game, requires lying, and an interesting story can also come of that as well. But it's never really used in like this negative moralistic way. I would even almost argue that the game sort of encourages you to lie and almost plays off lies as this sort of human necessity, right? Like a thing that you do in order to like spare people from harm, or like use like a white lie for that, or use a lie in order to like help yourself get through something that's difficult,
I have to admit, when I was looking at the game, I was watching footage of it, I was reading a little bit about the plot. The first thing that popped in my head actually was not Pinocchio. The first thing that popped in my head was, wow, this would be really easy to adapt into a Mega Man game. In terms of the character relationships and the overall story, I just thought, wow, I bet a Lies of Rock would be a terrific mod for this.
Yeah, or, it could just be Mega Man Legends 3, and you just have, the Lost Forbidden.
Oh, that's depressing.
Yeah, it's not happening. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's not. But I mean, if Capcom was smart, they would think about doing something like that, because with Mega Man's focus on bosses, there's a lot of crossover between the Souls-like focus on bosses. That could be very interesting.
100%.
If they were ever to dive into that idea. But anyway, so let's say, okay, the game really, really closely adheres to the Souls-like blueprint of Dark Souls, all of the rest. How does it diverge from that inspiration in terms of its gameplay? Or does it?
It does a little bit. I mean, there are ways that you could essentially do some of the things that Lies of P is trying to do with like Dark Souls things, or Elden Ring, like weapons and items and magic, etc. But the Legion arm is probably the biggest main difference, in my opinion, which is, the sort of gun arm thing that's on your left arm that you use to do elemental damage, which is set up in a familiar rock, paper, scissors sort of way, where you do more damage with poison to human enemies, you do more damage with shock to puppet enemies, and you do more damage with fire to the sort of like undead-ish enemies in the game. And like you can use your Legion arm to do that. You can also use your Legion arm to like tag enemies and pull towards them. You can use it to set down mines, which can be pretty tactical for some of the bosses, especially for staggering, which seems to be also a way bigger thing here than in barring Sekiro, any of the others, the From Software games. You can also use it for like ranged attack, like, from varying distances. But it has a lot of sort of strategic use and is worthwhile to, put some of your Legion points that you get, like the pieces that you get throughout the game, into different Legion arms in order to like have a little bit of variety for approaches. And I would also say that advance, the stat that is associated with Legion arm, is definitely going to be an underrated one, probably, because I don't know, being able to deal more damage with some of the elemental arms can be so crucial to get past some of the hardest bosses. And this game has some insane bosses.
One of the things that I guess one of your critiques about the game is, traditionally speaking, the way that a lot of games handle bosses are a last test. They're the final exam of a level. That's historically been what a last boss is. But in this particular game, you point out that the game doesn't adequately prepare players for the boss fights. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is definitely a classic Souls design tactic that dates back to Demon Souls, where like when you run through an area, it throws these small enemies at you that are a little bit of teasers for the boss. And the like weapons and strategies that you use in areas are almost entirely super relevant when you get to the boss fight for that area. Like you'll encounter enemies that are like super weak to fire. The final boss of that area will have like a fire weakness. You encounter enemies that like move quickly and try to get around you. The final boss would be like a quicker humanoid boss. But Lies of P doesn't really do this. In fact, a lot of the time, it won't be anything at all. Like the boss of the end of the area, like the strategy that you use to get there, not relevant at all. And that can be really harmful early on, because you could be upgrading an electric type like attack so that you can fight the puppet enemies, and then you'll encounter an electric puppet boss who is extremely resistant to electricity. And it's like, you spend all these points in advance and stuff, and because the game doesn't let you like change your character's loadout early in the game, like you have to get more than halfway through the game. In fact, through what I would consider to be the games like Smo and Ornstein, which is famously like the middle of Dark Souls 1 boss that like is the big first barrier of difficulty. You can't change your character's thing until after that boss in this game, and it's really frustrating because oh man, yeah, some of those early bosses are really tricky, and you can level yourself to a point where like you're kind of screwed. You may have to start over, which I'm not a big fan of. So yeah, there are accessibilities in design that you could do to prevent this. And my most major critique with this game is that it sort of misinterprets the essence, the soul, if you will, of the Souls genre. Which is Miyazaki's initial design, where he wanted to highlight the transience between like passing players. Like this sort of transient cooperation is how he's designed all of the games in his line at From Software. And it's not here because there is no multiplayer. You can't get assistance on the bosses. And that to me is a bit of a failure of design, because it makes that thing of, you can screw yourself so bad that you may be better off just starting over. Like it could alleviate that quite a lot, to be able to like summon in another person to fight some of the bosses. And they give you like a spirit thing that you can summon in, but it's not really that useful in some of the bosses. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, does the weapon customization system help in any way on that? Because this game does have one of the more unique aspects of this. It actually has a fairly deep weapon customization system, where you can, customize your weapons, obviously, but in a different way from other Souls-like games. Does that compensate slightly for the getting good aspect of it?
Yeah, yes and no. It's really interesting, and I do love this departure from the From Software design that you can put a hammer head on a dagger handle and make it into like a weird fast weapon. Love that idea. And it is helpful, especially early on. I found a like poison dagger earlier on in the game that comes on the end of this like pole arm thing, and I ended up putting a fire weapon on the end of that, and I just wrecked some of the bosses with this fire weapon that I invented. But the but on the end of that is that the boss weapons in the game are so much more powerful than any regular weapon you could make, that it's almost like by about a third of the way through the game, maybe about halfway through the game, it just becomes unnecessary to even use the regular weapons, and none of their configurations are going to be as strong as the boss weapons. So
wait, so you can't dismantle the boss weapons and build new weapons out of them?
No, you can't. And I understand that design decision, and I agree with it in large part. But you know, it does erase that a little bit.
One thing that honestly you and I think everybody else felt was that, my goodness, this is a pretty looking game. It has an extraordinarily strong art style, some very good looking graphics, some great music as well. The music in this game, I listened to some of it, sounds amazing. What aspects of all of that stand out to you?
Oh yeah, this game is like audio visual candy for those who like medieval or Belle Epoque, which is what this is based on, which is like 1800s France, or Gothic or any of that. Like, you're gonna be steampunk. If you like steampunk, oh yeah, this is really gonna connect your gears
Steampunk
together.
Pinocchio,
Yeah, it'll get your gears turning for sure. No pun intended there. But yeah, it's beautiful. And I think, I mean, every aspect of it, like from just the rain physics and the water and the buildings, and like especially the character designs, like not just boss designs, which are all really cool and unique, and you know, like there's a few bosses, especially in late game, where I was just like, oh my god, I don't want to fight you. I just want to like look at you. I just want to I just want to see all of your animations play out, and perhaps not be tortured by them, having to like be beaten down by them 100 times. But yeah, just not just the bosses though, but also the NPCs, and even more so Pinocchio himself. It's so cool. And this is something that, Alex, feel free to chime in here about, but sort of a connection between Cyberpunk and Lies of P, and an evolution of the RPG genre that has been so long coming, that you can change your clothing, your outfit, and fashion souls however you like, and it doesn't affect your character. That always drove me nuts, right? It's been this like sort of thing that has existed since the 80s, when, you know, I don't know, Final Fantasy and the original Dragon Quest like created the genre. They're like, we need a way for players to be able to spend their money that they earn from battling on something that's useful. And they're like, what can we make? Like, oh yeah, armor, and then that, like, we could upgrade that. It could increment, and that could like give them benefits. And it's just like been this like product of RPG design ever since, that has just fallen down like a boulder, you know, through the ages, into every role-playing game ever. That armor is associated with benefits, and I'm so glad that these new games are transitioning away from that.
Yeah, that's definitely a great tie-in with Cyberpunk, because I'll never forget the final cutscene of one of the endings I got when I first did the base game, and I didn't touch on this when I was talking about Cyberpunk, but yeah, the base game, like you had to like mix and match your clothing, not for fashion purposes, but purely for functional purposes. And in this dramatic moment at the end of the base game, I was wearing this stupid green hat that looked like Kermit the Frog was sitting on top of my head as this really dramatic conversation was happening between me and Keanu. And I'm just like, this sucks. And it just completely took me out of the ending.
Oh.
But yeah, for a game like Cyberpunk that wants to like kind of emphasize that role playing so much with its storytelling, getting rid of that requirement, huge upgrade, and I just got to trust purely for style this time around, and really appreciated that change. I do think the armor system makes more sense in Dark Souls, but like by the time you get to like Bloodborne, where like the stat differences are like so minuscule, it's just like, why even like make that tied to stats at that point? So yeah, I'm glad that they did just got rid of that completely for Lies of P, because it makes sense, honestly.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that ProZD has a skit about that. Cutscenes, here it is, cutscenes that keep the stupid clothes you put on your character. Love ProZD. It's one of my favorite. One of his videos is picking RPG clothes based on max stats instead. It's one of those videos that no matter how many times I see it, it still cracks me up. Okay, one last question for you about Lies of P, which is at the very end of your review, you express some eagerness in seeing where the development team, what they develop next. Do you hope that they continue down the Souls-like genre, or do you think that they should pivot and try something else?
I mean, certainly the action RPG genre, I think they should be sticking to, because it seems to be something that they're pretty talented at making. But so long as it's moody and has fluid gameplay and compelling systems and a fun story, I suppose I don't really mind if it stays in the Souls-like genre, but it would be dope. The character that is sort of teased at the end of my review and also at the end of the game, I would love to see in a Dark Souls game. Everybody memeified the like Pinocchio being a Dark Souls game, and from the beginning I was like, yeah, that actually sort of makes sense. But this one would actually be really sort of funny, and yeah, I don't know, I would enjoy it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming on to talk about your respective games, but we're not quite over yet. Today's discussion question, it's going to be a little bit different because this episode is releasing on Monday, October 2nd. The next day, October 3rd, is going to be the 30th anniversary of Secret of Mana. So, in North America, anyway. It would have come out on October, according to Wiki anyway, it would have come out on October 3rd, 1993, which was a long time ago. And in honor of this, I guess, we had a retro review that got posted from RPG Fan, from David Silber about Secret of Mana. And spoiler alert, he didn't like it very much. This was a retro review of a game, a beloved Squaresoft action RPG, that he just didn't really like it. So when Mike and I saw this review, we kind of knew what was going to be coming, and obviously that's fine. It's a reviewer's opinion. We don't censor our reviewers and censor their opinions based on how beloved an old game is. Anyway, it caused what could be described as a firestorm on Facebook and perhaps Instagram as well. A lot of passionate arguments in the comment sections about this review, and not just about whether or not the review was correct or not. Actually, weirdly, it was people split down the middle, it seemed, where a lot of people were saying, this is what I thought for years. This is what I thought when I first played the game. I'm so glad that people are coming around to this. And then a lot of other people who were saying that this is the worst review ever. It's ridiculous. I can't believe that Secret of Mana got a 65. What got me, though, and the thing I wanted to talk about here, is that there were quite a few people who were saying things like retro reviews should not judge a game based on the current marketplace. It should not the scores, the point of view, it should not be coming at it from a modern perspective. And I have to admit that point of view, I've been struggling trying to understand that idea. and I can't. It doesn't make any sense to me. The idea that, especially if someone new comes to the game who has never played Secret of Mana before, or Final Fantasy VI, or any classic RPG, a beloved RPG from the 1990s, they can't look at the game from the perspective of when it was released. They can't. They can only look at it from their current perspective and how much they enjoyed it and how it lives up to today's standards. A lot of people raised a lot of points about, do we do that with film? Do we do that with books? Like an old film, do we watch it and we said, well, obviously, what's going on? The camera movement is ridiculous. It's very, very static. It's not, the subject matter is really... My point is, I'm very curious about your opinions on this. For a retro review, do you think that the reviewer should be considering the time it was released in the final score, or should they be reviewing it based on their unvarnished experience in today's gaming environment?
Yes.
I mean, not only can the reviewer not fully immerse themselves back into the headspace of when any of these retro games first came out, but wouldn't that destroy the point of doing a revisit,
a
review, a retrospective? Yeah. I mean, I think retro reviews are a really cool idea that allow us to re-explore some of the classics that we loved back in the day, or that we missed back in the day, and just see the interesting ways that old school game design had these specific strengths and unique little quirks that and how they measure up against modern game design and its own strengths and weaknesses. Because personally, there's a lot to unpack for an older game or a newer game in terms of derivative design choices, uninspired design choices, and part of the fun of a retro review is taking a specific title that has a certain reputation and seeing how it measures out and comparing the two types of game design approaches. And on that regard, Secret of Mana, it's not the best game to go back to. I played it again. I played it as a kid, and my brother loved it back in the day, because it's kind of a mix of sort of Zelda and Final Fantasy sensibilities, and those were two of his favorite series, and it looked great, it sounded great. But there's been games since Secret of Mana, like its sequel, Seiken Densetsu 3 / Trials of Mana, that just does what it does better. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, wouldn't that be the game to get a higher score, if anything? And then Secret of Mana can be criticized as something that was kind of a stepping stone to that sort of better formula? I don't know. That makes sense to me, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's both, though. I think, you do. You want to talk about it in the frame of today and what it's like for you as a person to look at a game. But looking at, I don't know, any review that's talking about a retro game is going to be thinking about the time when it came out and sort of the cultural moment, etc. And I mean, even David says in the bottom line that it deserves your respect, that Secret of Mana deserves your respect. And it sort of does, because it had an audience at the time, but there's just no audience for this game these days. There are 100 better titles that have grown so much in this co-op RPG genre that, I don't know, you'd be even better off playing Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance from maybe 10 years after this game. And I don't know, to invoke the review that David wrote, we've come a long way since this game. And I don't know. I think that's worthwhile to sort of bring this score to a way that is contemporary and talks about the contemporary moment and is a reflection of the time in which he wrote the review, because the review is valuable as its own sort of cultural object. Maybe 20 years from now, people will have learned to love the jank of a game like Secret of Mana and love the edges of the game, and maybe it'll come back up, So I think it has to be both.
For me, I mean, coming at it as the review manager, when I read the review, I think there was an undercurrent in some of the comments that this review never should have been published, which is insane. I mean, ignoring everything else, it's a good review. He has points, they are supported. They're his opinion. He's supporting it, and he's providing evidence. It's a good review. He justifies everything in the review, and that's what a review needs to be. And more importantly, it's his opinion. And I think it's a legitimate opinion. Secret of Mana is not my favorite SNES RPG. Squaresoft released some real bangers, and Secret of Mana was almost one of them. But I never loved it the way that other games did. Like, if I had to review the game right now, I'd probably review it a little higher than 65, but it would certainly not be an editor's choice. And I don't think that's me looking at it not through nostalgia goggles either. I think the game genuinely has some significant issues, even when it was released. I can't seem to get my mind wrapped around the concept that these games need to be judged by the standard that they were held at when they were released. That concept to me is just wrong. And when people bring up old movies, I'm sorry, we don't do that with old movies. We don't watch Casablanca and judge it by the standards of 1940s. We judge it by today's standards. And we do see the problematic elements in it and the things that are not fantastic or the things that did not age particularly well. And we can acknowledge those aspects and still enjoy it. And I think we can do that with Secret of Mana too. Because, again, it's his opinion. That's what a review is, guys. It's an opinion. And as long as that opinion is supported, and it's not just off the cuff, or it's not designed specifically to get a negative reaction, like it's not a trolling review, which this definitely is not a trolling review. It's a good friggin' review. Then I think that it has a legitimate point of view that, if not agreed with, needs to be respected. See, my favorite things in the comments of this thing was the people who were talking about the game and how much they loved the game and like their memories of it or their current experience.
So happy for you guys.
To me,
by the way,
like that's awesome. And that's the kind of, I guess, positive thing, or just someone who says, I don't really agree with this review and here's why. That's a great, useful comment. But folks who are attacking the review or attacking the reviewer because their opinion is different from them, I'm sorry, that doesn't contribute anything to the conversation. It shuts it down. It's damaging. It is fairly pointless, in my opinion. And that, I guess, is just the internet in general in many cases.
Yeah, man, start a blog, write your own review, Like, give it a 75 if you want. I don't know, I'd probably give it a 60. Whatever. Do your own thing.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, like, David paid respects to what this game really continues even to excel at, which is the sound and the visuals. Like,
he went out of his way to do it, actually.
It's got phenomenal pixel art. It's got an amazing score. And, like, if that's enough for you to kind of, like, work through the game and, like, kind of accept its quirks on their own terms, then, like, that's great. You can enjoy it on those merits, but that clearly wasn't enough for David, so he gave it a lower score. So just that's the way it kind of evened out, right?
Yeah, man.
Yes, and I mean, there have been a lot of controversial games released over the last few months. I mean, just Starfield, for example, also received a tremendous amount of the discourse about that was just a nightmare. Yes, well,
wait, what do you call it, Alex? You called it the discourse dumpster fire.
Discourse dumpster fire, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate statement, and we accept it because that's our job. We're reviewers. But again, you can't review a game based on nostalgia. I mean, you can, but it's not going to have any particular value as a review. You can only review it based on your current experience.
I mean, nostalgia can be part of that experience. It's just like, I don't know. I think that, like, the main problem here is that it sort of sucks to just have your work sort of, like, derided in this way, even when you produce something that, like, you put a lot of effort into. I don't know. It's a weird thing, right? I think people should be allowed to tell you that they loved this game and disagree with you on the internet, but it's another thing to be like, oh, you're getting paid to write this good review for a game, or like, oh, this person doesn't know anything, they should be fired from the staff or whatever, which is kind of the, like, knee-jerk reaction that fans seem to be having sometimes with this stuff. And it's a little ridiculous. I don't know. It's very, like, attacky on the person And it doesn't need to be. Just love the game, hate the game, talk about it, you know?
That's the internet for you. But ignoring everything else, it is Secret of Mana's 30th anniversary, and there is a lot to celebrate in Secret of Mana. It's a fantastic 3-player multiplayer game at a time when they really didn't exist. It does have amazing pixel art. It does have ridiculously great music. And yeah, it actually can be a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun playing Secret of Mana. So I think, personally, there's a lot here to celebrate. And if you agree with that, awesome, play the game. If you don't agree with that and you played the game, then that's fine too. If you haven't played Secret of Mana, hey, maybe you should. It's in Collection of Mana. You get 3 mana games, including Trials of Mana, which is, some consider it Secret of Mana, but better. So I say give it a download, play them, and find out for yourself.
Ultimately, a score shouldn't, a score is reflective of the person who played the game, but it should never be taken as a sign to, dissuade anybody from checking it out. People should check out old games. It's awesome to check out old games. You'll find some gems that appeal to your particular sensibilities. You'll encounter some really unique design choices that kind of studios are more averse to taking nowadays. The retro games there's a vast library of retro games with all kinds of interesting stuff, all kinds of flaws, all kinds of triumphs, and it's worth exploring on your own and seeing what you like, seeing what's out there.
Absolutely. And to anyone out there who's listening, we are going to continue doing retro reviews because we're RPG fan. We love doing retro reviews because we love playing these games. Our love of RPGs and JRPGs is right in our DNA. It's almost in our name.
Yeah.
So yeah, there will be more retro RPGs, and there will likely be more scores that people disagree with, both scores that they think are too high and scores that they think are too low.
I would like to issue a challenge to those of you out there who are a little salty about this. Go back and play Adventure on the Atari and let me know if you think that. Honestly, I would consider that game to be an RPG. I would call that a very early RPG. And let me know if that's got all the gameplay trappings that you sort of expect in a modern game. And let me know if that one's fun to go back and play. Maybe it will be for you, but it's tough, I don't know.
It can be tough. And I mean, it's going back to, for example, point-and-click adventure games have come a long way. And I think that point-and-click adventure games eventually reached a point where they are still eminently playable. Let's call it the LucasArts adventure era. But go back and try to play King's Quest 1.
Yeah.
It's challenging. It's hard. Try using a text parser instead of using a verb system. It is a challenging situation. Games evolve. And it's not like these games do not have value, both in terms of enjoyment and historical value. For example, if works of art lost someone today might have a real hard time reading Pinocchio.
Mm-hmm.
But, without Pinocchio, Liza P. wouldn't exist. And there are many people who enjoy reading Pinocchio.
True.
So it's not like it loses its value, but it might lose some of its cultural significance. But that's just the nature of media. Anyway, so if you want to celebrate our cultural significance, you can find our stuff at rpgfan.com/shop. We have a shop now, and we have lots of things that we sell on it, including some new 25th anniversary merchandise coming out that we would just love if you could check out. If you'd like to support us here at Random Encounter, you can check out some of our past episodes. We've had quite a run the last few weeks of just talking about some very, very interesting games. I'm going to be off next week. Zach is going to be here as my temporary replacement, and they're going to be talking about a feature that's coming out on RPG Fan in a few weeks, and I think it's going to be a really cool episode. But we are not the only podcast here at RPG Fan. We also have Retro Encounter. So last week we had part 2 of our deep dive into Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, and then next week we're going to be continuing with the Dragon theme, and it's going to be an episode focused on Dragon Quest. Which, if you are not aware, Solosi likes Dragon Quest. We also have Rhythm Encounter, which is RPG Fan's music podcast. And last week was an episode focusing in on town themes. It was technically Town Themes Part 2 because there was one a good many years ago, but this one had some really interesting themes that I never heard before. So it was a really solid episode. And the next week is going to be something a little bit different. It's going to be focusing on, dance music, particularly at the electronic variety. So that's going to be cool because RPG dance music, Awesome. If you'd like to get in contact with us here, you can fire me off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com if you have any suggestions for future episode themes or discussion questions. This one certainly raised a lot of interesting points this week. Please fire it off. We'll acknowledge you. We'll give you a heads up. And if you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on Mastodon at johnologan@mastodon.social. But I am not the only person on this podcast with a media presence online. Aleks, where can we find you online?
I do not have a media presence online, but if you want to reach out to me, you could do so through email at alexfranicek@gmail.com.
Okay, and Noah?
Yeah, you can find me in most places at Noapolitan, though perhaps I may be departing from my ex Twitter, no pun intended, pretty soon. So maybe I'll be on, I don't know, Blue Sky, Mastodon, something,
whatever replaces Twitter or augments Twitter, or who knows if even the concept of Twitter will continue. I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens in the 2024 presidential elections and seeing what platform actually gets some traction when it comes to whatever crazy stuff that Trump says. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends to help us get the word out there, and rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Again, Noah, Aleks, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Aleks, it was your first episode on Random Encounter. How'd it go?
It was a blast. Thanks for inviting me on.
It was an absolute pleasure having you on. And to everyone out there listening, whatever you're playing, have fun.